Diane, I'd be running. You're our only legislator. I was been told there's 3 others. So, yeah. I think we're going to start anyway. Good morning and welcome to our last of the legislative sessions this morning, brought to you by the Bridport Grange and the Addison County Farm Bureau each Monday throughout the legislative session. And then we skip a few weeks and come back. Now the legislators have gone home. Even though they're coming back, we're trying to do a little wrap up and find out what actually happened during the legislative session. And so far we have 1 legislator with us, and so we will attempt to ask her questions and interview her during this process, and that of course is Representative Diane Lanpher. Diane?
Thank you, Tim. Good morning, everybody, and I'll add my thanks to the Grange. And the Addison County Chamber, do they also sponsor? Or
They're a part sponsor, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I don't think we do enough thank yous for putting this on for all the years that I've been coming. So I'm Diane Lanpher from Virgins. I've been in the House now. This is my ninth year. Served 6 years on transportation and the last 3 years on the House Appropriations Committee, which and I represent the towns of Ferrisburg, Virgins, Panton, Waltham, and Addison. And I'm hoping that some of my colleagues come. I have the pleasure of, when I'm not in session, as of about 4 years ago, we sold our insurance business. So I don't have the other job, so to speak. So I get to do this pretty much full time. And this year, I have another little job that is taking me to new heights. Is my grandson. Was born in October, so I'm grateful that my daughter is a chef, executive chef for 4 restaurants, and seeing that I've got a couple minutes up here, I have my grandson Sam, who is 7 months old now, 4 days a week when I'm not in session, so I don't have him until 11 o'clock. So usually in the morning I get to drink a lot of coffee before he arrives. So I've brought him to a few meetings, and he's been to many protests and expressed a lot of opinion with his grandmother thus far. So I'm sure you might see him at various meetings. So this is the end of session wrap up, except for we haven't. Usually we've gone home and closed up so long ago that we've done all our laundry and have put our books away, that by the time we come here in June, we have to spend Sunday afternoon sort of refreshing what was it that we did again now that we were so proud about? So I did take a look at it. I did write a sort of almost end of session report because we're not done. Although who knows, maybe we are. There was a couple of vetoes. Now, if I understand correctly, June 21st and the 22nd, you know, we often, when we leave, we always leave a date out so that people reserve for a possible veto override session or a session to discuss it. But it looks like this year we'll probably be using that. And that would be June 21st and 22nd. And of course, you're all welcome to come. In that 2-day session that's coming up, you know, right now there's a veto threat of the budget, and I believe the education yield bill has been delivered to the governor, and he has until, I believe, Wednesday, if I'm correct, don't quote me on that, to either sign, veto, or what we have in Vermont, what we call a pocket veto, is to not sign, but it will become law after 5 days. So that has until, I believe, Wednesday. So we don't know yet. That's going to be up to him and his team to have examined what the options are. Maybe he'll sign them both, and we will have completed our session. But if he doesn't sign them or vetoes them, then we'll probably come back on the 21st and 22nd. We do not have the support now that we once had of all parties. I did write down a quick kind of like what I see as my synopsis. It's really unfortunate because we started off, as I wrote, the beginning of this year, unlike what we see happening in Washington. In Vermont, we like to actually think of ourselves as different because I'm pretty sure I would not even want to do this job if we were in some other state. We don't have the rancor and the contention. We have different thing of opinions. We may decide that, you know, how we get there is maybe in a different way, but usually, typically, regardless of party affiliation or urban or rural, whatever group that you are, Vermonters as a whole have already determined where do we want to go? What do we want to do? We may differ on how we might want to get there or what it would take, but we don't have a fundamental difference on the fact that we don't want to support our kids, that we don't want to support our workforce, that education is extremely important, the environment, our farming industry. These are things that are common throughout. So this particular session, which I guess it was just going so good for so long that I guess we had to have something happen. Unprecedented common ground and working together across all party lines and groups and wherever you were from in Vermont, that we passed the budget from the House and the Senate with 173 to 1 vote, with the governor praising it. We didn't think that was possible in January at some of where we were with some of the things that needed to be balanced, but it's when we all work together that happens. With cooperation and respect, we get things done and we listen to each other and try to incorporate when we can. And now the last hours of that last week, we were on track to be out May 6th. That Saturday. The Monday prior to that week, we were looking at really being up. I was already packed up and out of the house that we rent, and things were moved back to Virgins, and we had about 4 days of work left to do, and we were home. And then things changed. But we could maybe do this demand, an amendment that came onto the floor of the Senate on that last week, changed the direction and put some high demands, which I'm sure you've heard of a lot of what was demanded on the to insert ourselves into the local negotiations on teachers' health care, which from my opinion we don't need to be a part of. It's already happening. Savings are being achieved. The question really is whether or not Montpelier should take control and have those savings for my committee room, which I have to tell you is a nice, but it is not my money. I believe that those local savings that will be achieved should be used at the local level for what they would like. But that's where we are in the tough negotiations. So the governor has threatened to veto the budget, which does not even have this subject in it, but the education yield bill does. So that's where we are, in a bit of a stalemate around that issue. But there are many other things, as I look back at, that we were very, very successful at. Paid family leave. We passed it out of the House, and the Senate will take that up. You can take a look at that. That is H-196. That is a companion that really responds to where Vermonters say that they need in our workforce and for businesses to attract and retain highly skilled and qualified people for their jobs. It's one of the things that I hear about when I go around, that every business that I talk to, they cannot find the workers that they need. I think it's just our population is decreasing, and you're just not able to find plumbers, snowplow drivers, dentists, whatever it is, childcare workers. This is just not, they're in short supply, which we need to attract more people to our state, which is why it's very important that we have the benefits that at businesses to recruit. I'm going to stop talking because I'm sure there's going to be, I know that I'm the only one here thus far, so I'm just going on and on and on. But questions are available, and in interim, I have no problem being here alone, Tim.
Okay. We will grill you to the fullest extent.
Okay.
Just to remind folks that if you do have a question, please move to a microphone, so you do that, and we'll move on from there. And Diane, you said the dirty laundry was all taken care of. I think you left some dirty laundry behind. I just have one question technically. If, in fact, it was only the marijuana bill that got vetoed, would you be coming back for a veto session in June, or in your estimation, would you just pass it by?
This would be just my opinion on that. I've not been a supporter of that, but I do recognize that we live in a democracy and the majority rules, you know. I don't think so, Tim. I cannot see where that would be, because of if the vote had been 110 or 170, you know, for the House and the Senate, there might be a very, very strong presence that this is what the will of Vermonters want. But when a bill passes out of the House, it's when you need 76 at 79. I can't, you know, so I would have to wrestle, and I'm really going to have to wrestle with this. It's a good question. When you come back now for the veto session, it's about the House and the Senate now standing up for what it is that the work that they produced. You're not really voting on, again, the actual issue. You're voting on, yeah, we passed this. Yes, Vermonters, we send the signal that this is what, as a majority, we believe in. I'm going to have to decide, do I stand up to support the House's position now, not my position, but as a group, our position, and that's going to be a little tricky. So, to answer your question, if it was only that, I don't think so. But because of the delay, like I talked about that last week, when the budget doesn't close and the tax bill doesn't close and it's still under negotiations or under consideration, the space that creates within the building, that doesn't mean everything else stops. All the other work can continue. If but for that delay, there would not have been time or room for the marijuana bill to have passed.
And will you still come back in October?
The October piece was, sorry, John, the October reserve, which is what Tim's talking about, is we had a week and a half or so of savings if we left on May 6th, meaning the legislature, we would not be overspending our budget for our salaries are coming back. If we left May 6th, and it left us an opportunity to schedule an October possible session depending on what happens in Washington, and us to be able to respond to the new budget from there and what would need to be done. Now, what happens, now we've used up, we don't have the extra money. It would come at a new cost, and we'd have to evaluate what comes out of Washington. But remember, when the budget passed the House that Friday that we took a vote, they were voting in Washington on whether to repeal Obamacare. And it was looking like it might go. And if that had occurred, from initial information to us was that it would have a significant impact financially on Vermont of somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 million. That's a lot to find just on that one line, not to mention the EPA and no money for the lake and other things that we're watching very carefully, after school or education funding. So until they actually pass something out of DC, we won't know if we need to come back in October.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
John, it's your turn. Wake up.
John Ball from Madison. Diane, I thought you'd like to be interested in knowing that your grandson has a contemporary. My first grandson, Jan Louise's seventh grandchild, was born 12 days ago. And so it's a new experience for me, and It actually makes what I'm going to talk about or mention here very pertinent to me personally, to us personally. And that is the vaccination issue. I know this is a passed bill, but it needs to be looked at again. There is information that has come out to show that the information you got about the vaccines was not all true. There's been fraud discovered in the CDC, Center for Disease Control, by one of the lead authors on the paper that exonerated, when it became public, thimerosal, the mercury-containing preservative in vaccines, from autism. The CDC itself study was showing there was a link to autism, and that William Thompson, this author, became a whistleblower. He contacted another scientist who evaluated his data after he divulged that what had happened in the CDC. So there is something that so serious that it really needs to be looked into. It came up in the Congress of the United States. So far, William Thompson hasn't been subpoenaed, but there's a movement to have him subpoenaed and come and testify to Congress. I'm not, and I don't think anybody who is really looking at this issue now is anti-vaccine. That's a manufactured, dirty word to slur anybody who questions it. I think we're all interested in childhood safety, and we're interested in the efficacy of vaccines as well. Just one more point on this, and that is that one of the arguments that the vaccine companies gave, Merck and the other companies, pharmaceutical companies, was that these vaccines are absolutely safe and they're absolutely efficacious. The efficacious part I'm not so sure of, but the safe part, they were asked to, finally somebody said, oh, so many studies been done to show their safety, where are these studies? And no study has come up. They cannot point to a study that shows vaccine safety. On the other hand, there are hundreds of studies that show the link between mercury and all these childhood diseases that we're seeing so many of these days. It needs to be looked at. One final word. I have all the videos that were presented in a series called Vaccines Revealed. There are 9 videos. I have the transcripts in my hand. We presently own them. And I would like to show these or make them available to any legislator who is interested in really looking at this issue again from a whole different perspective. I think probably my 2 minutes are up now. Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome. So I appreciate you bringing it up, and you're right. It's very close to heart, especially when we have grandchildren. The 2 that I have in Philadelphia are a little bit older, but the one here locally is just born, like you said. 12. Congratulations. And I had the pleasure of actually being there when he was born, and that was a thrill. And I was actually at the doctor's office when that vaccine, not vaccine, where are we going to go, parents' decision. John, and you bring up a very good point. You know, it's bigger than just the vaccine piece. It's about trusting. It's about trusting, whether it's the food we eat or the water we drink or the air that we breathe, you know, things that we put on the table. We're questioning, which I believe is a good thing. That doesn't mean, I'm very, very careful about not going down maybe some rabbit holes, so to speak, that go too far. But I don't have a problem reading about it. But I might not give it as high a credence as, you know, as other, but I really do believe that you should not just take things at blind faith and that take a look at it. I don't know if there's appetite right now. I know that you said the anti-vaccine is nonsense, but questioning is important. I think what you'll have to help me with is how much energy and money and response do we put into something of this nature, or do we rely a little bit, although it's a little difficult now, a federal CDC piece. But I think we should put that big question mark on there all the time and do some research. And then, as I've learned being in this position, it's very important that I understand, information that I bring forward needs to come from a solid place that has been vetted out. And I'm not so sure that we're there yet. I'm watching, measles and mumps and things that in our past were, part of daily life. But it's a different world right now between, and there's new things like Zika and the West Nile and the mosquito, and I'm trying to think of what that starts with a P?
Zika.
The triple E. There's so many things now that, my goodness, I took my grandson down to the Button Bay Point, and that's all I can think about is the mosquitoes and what did I do?
And the deer ticks.
And the
Anyway.
deer ticks, yes.
Mark
So-
is next.
Diane, appreciate your being the only one here. So thank you. You mentioned Obamacare, the teachers, and the government involvement in healthcare. Well, the state has been involved in my healthcare and actually destroyed some of the private policies I had. And you have Obamacare, which is basically the federal government or the state government putting in exchanges, taking over the health care. Why are teachers exempt? The only way this is going to work is if everybody is all in, and I mean all the legislatures, all our senators, all our representatives, the president and his family are all on Obamacare. So I would like to point out the fact that the state has been involved in this destruction of the healthcare system, and to say that the teachers should be separate from the whole process of the House coming down, I disagree with. They also mentioned the president, and I think the president did something right in his withdrawal of the Waters of the U.S. rule, and to trim the EPA's wings. EPA spent money, federal money, lobbying and paying other groups to lobby in favor of that rule. And that is a violation of the federal law. I can go through a whole bunch of other things that they have done. I don't know if people realize, but the EPA has its own paramilitary force, which government pays $74 million in order to support. So I think we should be looking at this environmental issues that we have, not along the lines of emotion that, oh, we've got to do something, and anything we do is got something. The rebellion against these rules, like the Paris Climate Accord, is not based on the science that it's warming, but the fact that these things come in and say these proposals, this is good for the environment, but really we got to spend state money or tax money to do this, which actually is a subsidy for a small group of people. And I can draw parallels with these RAPs that are being imposed, because the Conservation Law Foundation, on its website, 3 months before the hearings were scheduled for this, said that they and the DEC came up with new rules that were going to apply to all farmers. And the hearings that we had were nothing more than a dog and pony show where they trotted this out, told us what to do, gave us 3 minutes to respond, and ignored us. So we have a big problem in this lack of openness on these rules generations. And the only thing to do is to make sure that all the databases that they use to generate these rules are made public with the rules, which is not what happened with the water quality. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mark. There's a lot there. After three things, I usually have to write something down, but let me see if I can unpack this. There's healthcare and environment were the main two, right? Okay. So on healthcare, just so you know, just because legislators, we don't get healthcare or retirement. I mean, you would think because we're involved with that, we would actually give ourselves healthcare, but Vermont legislators have no healthcare as a part of this job. So I don't need it, which is what makes it possible for me to be able to run. But I think it would have been. There are many members who are on who have to go through Medicaid because of income levels, which makes it a little tough to recruit. They would love to be on, and they are on Obamacare. So the original piece, I don't know, just to back up just a little bit, government has been a part of healthcare always. It's just, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid. I have TRICARE. So I have the pleasure of actually my husband being a retired military, and thank goodness for him. I should thank him every time I come to a microphone, because without his 3 times retiring and our military retirement that I have TRICARE from the government healthcare, which is fabulous, I would not be able to do this job because I wouldn't have the necessary components to be able to pull that out. So government is a part of our healthcare. There was a step Obamacare did do, which was to say you don't have to have your employer, if your employer doesn't offer you healthcare, which allows sort of the group buy, and you're just an individual, you could go through this exchange, was a marketplace so that people got the group rate, that you went into the exchange because you didn't have to go to just to a provider like Blue Cross and Blue Shield or MVP on your own. You're not going to negotiate the better deal. So through Obamacare, an exchange marketplace was created with vendors in there. We would have loved to, as you probably know, have had a public option in there, but that did not work out financially. They did not have the financial ability to be in there. That might be a direction to go in. But right now we've got sort of that hybrid in there of a market-based, but yet all individuals can be a part of it. The teachers piece is all of the negotiations that are happening is because of Obamacare. If you've heard in the past, years ago, that the Cadillac tax was coming, that as a part of what passed in Obamacare was if your plan was, I'm not going to use the right word here, but is maybe, luxurious, so to speak, the company or entity was going to have to pay this Cadillac tax on that. Both the state and or the teachers piece looked at their plans as being so good, which is a nice thing, which is one of the reasons I worked in the school system too for 8 years. That to sort of avoid that now, which is VHIVE, which is the Vermont Educators Health Insurance. I'm not getting that totally right, but VHIVE worked to come up with 4 different plans that school boards could offer teachers that would not be the plan that they have. So because of Obamacare, all teachers' health care expire, and they're going to move. They need to move to this a new way, or a new 4 plans that VHIVE has put together. That's what the discussions now, that when we saw some preliminary information, any one of those 4 are potential savers for the taxpayers. And so figuring out where teachers maybe are, winners and losers, but there's all around, even when the teachers come out whole, it still is a savings to Vermont, or to Vermont taxpayers. Okay, so school boards.
A quick question on that.
Yeah.
Is VHIVE then in the exchange?
I don't know if they're through the exchange or if they're on their own.
Because I think what's being said is that we should all be all in.
I believe that the plans, the 4 plans that they've presented, the platinum, the gold with savings, and the silver would be all comparable to what would be in the exchange.
Okay, so we can get...
I don't, I mean, I don't see where they would be all that different. Yes, Mark. Go ahead.
My question on this part was, why should the state stay out of negotiating for the teachers' contracts when for 20, 25 years they were involved in negotiating my own personal contract, healthcare contracts? So you say everybody should be in on the Obamacare where the government negotiates, and now you're also on the other hand saying state teachers' contracts should not be negotiated by the state. To me, that's contradictory.
Just not everybody is in on the exchange. That's the whole thing. It's an exchange or a marketplace for people who don't have options through their work or other things can go to purchase insurance at a reasonable rate and get subsidies, but not everybody is in the exchange now. One of the things that it did do that was, I would find it as a benefit that I think people realize that when you don't have your health care tied to your employment, you are free up to do things like maybe start your own entrepreneurship. You don't have to rely. There are many people that I work with at the state that only worked for the health care and they were afraid to switch jobs or to take less hours or maybe work part-time because they would lose their health care. Did I answer? I don't know if I answered your question, Paul or Mark. Not really, but they're not there. I mean, so I don't know if VHIVE, but I don't know if the plans are all that different.
Why the ban? Why is the opposition
Oh, negotiation.
all the teachers' contracts when the state has historically negotiated contracts for private health care like mine for 20 years?
So we do negotiate for health care as far as like the over umbrella in the state, as far as, we believe in community rating. That was back from the 90s. That goes to everybody, whether it's the teachers or whoever you are. You're right. There are certain roles that the government has put in that we've said that this is what, if you want to sell insurance in the state of Vermont, this is the way it's going to work. And we also, but that's not negotiating your policy. We're negotiating on how you conduct yourself in business in this state. We also are very, very good with the Green Mountain Care Board, really containing. We, unlike many states, have, I don't know, could be a good thing, maybe it's not, but the authority to review and okay hospital budgets. When they come in, they want an increase to this, and the same thing with insurance companies. This is not what happens in other states. It's just totally free market. And with utilities, we as a state have an entity that to keep those prices down have to go through those boards. So that part, you're right. We all have there's an impact on everybody. But why do we not do the teachers? Because they don't work for the state. They work for school boards. That's the fundamental difference. State employees are state employees, but I don't want to get into, if you work at UTC or Country Home Products as an employee between you and your employer to get into that negotiation. That is not my role. It's to get into whether or not that company should offer you a platinum plan if you want, or a silver plan if you want, or if you want to take less money, but you want to have a better benefit package. That's between you and your employer, not the state of Vermont.
It comes down to the government is mandating pools, insurance pools.
Yep.
Why are teachers not supposed to be in an insurance pool for the whole state?
Because they don't work for the state. Right.
Okay, Mark?
You're not, are you? I'm not in the pool for Obamacare. I've TRICARE. You have Medicaid. Yeah, it's a different. Right, Medicare is not, although there are some pieces of Obamacare that touches, yeah. It is a pool, but it's not.
This is turning into
Sorry,
a
no,
one-way conversation. If you don't move to the microphone, the folks at home can't understand what
that's true.
Diane is answering. So
the bottom line for me is the difference is when you don't work for the state of Vermont. I'm not going to get in the middle of you and your employer. That's why.
Spence?
Okay, well, I'd like to shift gears. And you said a little while ago that you're now free to work full-time for the legislature. So have you analyzed whether you're getting minimum wage?
Yes, I have. Because, that's what you do when you're kind of nerdy, especially during I calculated back of the envelope thing, especially the amount of time on the bridge. I think I made 67 cents an hour. Somebody said in the hallway, I'll just preface this with, we'll get asked quickly by people who are either lobbyists or people who have an opinion or want to get my reaction, passing in the hallway, will say, "Oh, Representative Lanfear, how do you feel about minimum wage?" And I said, "I'd love to get it."
Well,
They were.
so the state of Vermont's in violation of its own laws.
I'm
So,
not. Some legislators maybe not.
Okay, so I've got a question about the veto session, which
Yep.
is, I don't understand why the governor is threatening to veto the budget. Everybody, with one exception, agreed on the budget, and I don't think it has anything, some of us think it doesn't go far enough, but it's a response to the times that we're in. And I think it's remarkable that the legislature came together that way, so I hope the governor does not follow through on that. He's also threatening to veto the education yield, or whatever it's called, portion of the legislation. And I think that has very serious consequences financially for our education fund. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that and what the legislature and the governor can do. Pulling out your notes, that must be a substantive question. But what can the legislature do and the governor to come together and try to prevent what I think is a $400 million shortfall if we got to July 1st with no action?
Correct. All right, so keep me on track because I'll probably miss a few of those questions. It is very unfortunate that the budget, which was so unanimously agreed upon, is being held sort of off to the side in looking for a demand that has nothing to do with in the budget. But it's because the budget's a must-pass bill, and it creates the leverage, which it does because it's needed to run the government, and nobody wants to be the one to shut down Vermont's government. So there's that, and then the yield bill would be the place where that would be. And I have to say that both the House and the Senate and the governors they've continued negotiations even now, and even around this issue of what's possible, and even into that last day, there was many hours that press were thinking, oh, something's going to break because the speaker and the pro tem are in with the governor, and at one point they even called in the two elder statesmen of the state, Senator Mazza and Alice Emmons from the House, to come in and sort of be a part of that discussion to see if we could come to some place. And people thought that they were at a place where there has been some movement. The House position, as uncomfortable as it may have been, was willing to say, hey, listen, all right, we will look at, or maybe we'll put in here, we did put in there, the look at what and how should we be a part of the negotiations for the state, the teachers' health care, and to look at that over the next year. That was movement in the direction of maybe where we wanted to go. But we actually, tried to take into real consideration of where was the governor's position on the savings. Originally, he wanted to have, or that came out, what you hear, like the Beck Amendment and some other amendments that came up. There's this talk about 26 million, which is an easy number, but it's not really a real number. That's the maybe if and everything happened just so number, which I'm not so sure would actually occur, whoever was negotiating this, whether the governor, I'm not so sure he could negotiate better than the school board locally, but they feel like they could, but there's savings that are there. We're not so sure it could be the 26 million. So the question then became, where does the money go? The savings, is it supposed to come to general fund, to the state, or does it go back to the taxpayers? The governor wanted it, or says, for taxpayers, but his proposals were to take 1/3 of it and bring it to the general fund, the other third of it to go to teachers' retirement fund, and the other third to back to the taxpayers. So his stated position was to split it 3 ways. The House's position was, nope, whatever savings, although we calculated it would probably be a lot less than that, or maybe, but we would be willing to give that directly back. That is really kind of on the cusp of getting into the way of school boards negotiation. So we did get in there a little bit and said, in that yield bill, we will take 1.5 cents off the homestead property tax rate, which if you calculate is about the 1/3 that was there. We said we feel like there's going to be savings. School boards need to be able to decide what they want to do, but a piece of that we're going to say we're going to direct this 1.5 cent reduction. That was in the yield bill. That wasn't enough then. Then it was, no, it isn't about the taxes, and it's not about the possible looking into the future of this. I want the negotiations now. And that was the breaking point. So that was stalemate. So that's where we were at. And you wanted to know what will happen? There is not the numbers to now that budget of 173 to 1 vote. The governor has now, asked the support of his caucus to not support these bills, which is unfortunate. I don't know if you saw, if you miss a legislative breakfast or you really want to know what's going on, read Vermont Digger. It's an online newspaper. That's all they do. They follow every single room in the State House and Senate. So they do a very, very good job of covering way down into the weeds on situations. I've rarely come across where they've gotten it wrong. But so we've asked our Ledge Council, Spence and others, to the what if. What if we can't? What if there's a veto and there's probably a very good chance that we're not going to be able to override it? There's not the numbers there. We know that. What happens? So here was the report that came back to us, and I made a few notes in mine. But basically, through the Vermont Constitution, Chapter 2, Section 27, drawing money from the Treasury, no money shall be drawn out of the Treasury unless first appropriated by act of legislation. Without that bill, they cannot spend any money for 18. However, if there is no budget, it's written here, and this is their advice to us as legislators, debt service will be paid, so that's good, our bills, the debt service will be paid. The Pay Act for salary increases and associated costs for exempt employees, there's some provision for that. The third was carry forward authority to allow unspent funds. So it would allow the governor, the administration, to take carry forward money from 17 and maybe even earlier than just 17 and be able to use it, but only within the purpose to which it was appropriated. You can't say, oh, I've got leftover money from paving, so I want to move it to childcare. No. If you got leftover money for paving, you can move it into 18's paving. You can't switch it off. But number 4, and it was put here in red for a reason, government operations stop for agencies when they run out of funding. When is that? Don't know. That will be probably different depending on the agency from place to place. So that's a very, very big unknown. Not something, I know that we could, there's some other interim stuff that was possibly like, what if we could maybe pass some month-to-month budgeting? That is not how I would really like to proceed for Vermont. Our financial stability is at risk now. There are bigger things than the actions of just the ripple effect in the pond when you throw something in that you don't know what's going to happen. Vermont has a long history of we always balance our budget. We have a political environment that we get along and we balance our budget every year. This puts all of that into jeopardy, and some of what would what would occur. As far as the education bill goes, and I think you mentioned that, that's why I went to go get my notes. I'm just going to read this quick, all right? Assuming that the state budget is enacted, but 509, which is the education rate bill, is not. Number one, the uniform non-residential property tax rate would default to its statutory amount of $1.59 per 100 fair market value instead of the anticipated $1.55. That one would actually automatically go up. There would likely be no homestead property tax rate. The variable homestead property tax rates could not be set because there is no default yield. Until the yield is set, $416 million in homestead taxes could not be collected, creating a shortfall in the education fund. This will likely create additional impacts for municipalities and individual homeowners that are not yet to be fully understood. So we don't even understand the ramifications of when there's a $416 million immediate shortfall in the education fund. Because, yeah, you can almost imagine what that would create. Now, remember, we go back June 21st and the 22nd. Fiscal year 18 starts July 1. There is not a lot of room. And that is one of the things that I can honestly say. There's one thing that I'm not great at everything, but I can be a Gal Friday at many things. But looking at logistics and timing is something that my years at UPS have allowed me. When you look at things like timing, this is where, like, you know, great ideas, let's do this. Let's go for the moon. Well, you can't go to the moon next Friday. I'm just saying. That doesn't mean it's not a good idea. It's just, why would you, and this is where my frustration has been, why would you come out with ideas that cannot physically within the time frame occur? That's the part that I can't get past my head, and I'll have to let that go because some people don't see the logistics. There's just not time to take testimony, there's not time to do this and to get it done in a way that's well thought out to get it to pass. That doesn't mean that somebody doesn't agree that it's not a good idea.
Okay.
It's just insulting.
We're getting to the point where there's a line of questions, so we're going to shorten up a little bit and go back to our 2-minute deal for each person. Jan Louise is next.
2 minutes, huh? Well, I want to speak on something completely different. I'm tired of us humans talking about us humans. We seem to think we're the #1 species on the planet, and there's many of them out here that are being very violated. And in doing that, we are violating ourselves. We are killing off the bears. The bobcats now can be hunted for bobcats and fox, 9.5 months out of the year. They don't even have time to raise their young in the way that they should without being harassed. This is a real violation of a part of us. If we don't start looking at the fact that they are a part of us, I mean, look at the Lyme. Someone just brought up Lyme. We are overrun with rodents at this point. We have chickens and we have gardens. Rabbits, mice, moles, voles, rats, all have come in majorly since we've been killing off the coyotes. We are allowing the coyotes to be killed 24/7, 365 days a year, chased down for no reason at all, piled up their bodies as carcasses, and carried away for no reason at all. What's wrong with this picture? 2 young boys going up the mountain that I met a couple years ago were going coyote hunting. Terrible stories, I can tell you. They said, well, they're a vermin. I said, excuse me, what does a vermin mean? In one dictionary, it means something that kills something else for no reason at all. Who's the vermin here? They hung their heads and went back down the hill. They actually had their dog in a cage on the mountain up behind me as bait to bring the coyotes in so that they could track it back to the den and kill every single one of them. Mothers, babies, all of them. This is what we're teaching our children. Are we going to wake up? I hope so. If we don't, we're done. You know, it's absolutely absurd. All we focus on in this world is humanness. And what about, you know, the ticks? The ticks are out there because of all the rodents, and we're all getting Lyme. They're the vector that carries it, and then they come to us. Wake up, humans. It's time. It's now or never.
Thank you. I'll try to stick to the approved rules. That was so. Climate change is having impact now. It's not something that's coming in the future. It is here, and it's having impact, whether it's the increased rodents and things, and invasive species, and all of that is in that same bubble. But what I can honestly say that we looked at was the bill, and I was just trying to remember the number of it. It came out of Ag, the forest fragmentation bill. Looking at, when you say about the animals right now, looking at Vermont and development, when you've got forest and forest, right? And somebody wants to build a highway or development because they own this land, we're looking at, and we're now asking that I'm not going to get this right, but the consideration of not allowing what we'd call for transient, like bears and wolves and things, to be able to move around. You want to be able to keep forests together. So now, as a part of when you want to propose a development, the consideration is, are you breaking up forest into islands? And that is not going to be okay. I believe that will help with what you're at least saying. It may not be the end of all end, but addressing additional forest fragmentation is important.
Bobcats are being killed for their pellets, and fox to send to China. I mean, it's just, why are we allowing this? It's so insane. If we don't have the wildlife, we won't exist. And it's happening right before our eyes. We'll have ticks, and we'll have everything. We'll have bad environment, because they help to keep the environment healthy also. It's a whole system, and we've got it so out of balance. I hear what you're saying about the global warming. There's so many things out there. Can't we leave something that's another living creature alone and try to work on something else? I'm a beekeeper for 20 years, and it's a major struggle to keep bees alive. If we don't start waking up, we won't have food. They give us 1/3 of our food. So I have to speak for the animals. They cannot speak for themselves.
Thank you. You're next.
Ed?
Very patient.
Thank you, Diane, for being the lone person. I do appreciate that the legislature, despite the teachers' health care, first time in a long time, has not come up with a big increase. I believe Harvey Smith said the last 5 years we've had a 5% increase every time, and the economy's been growing at around 2%. So that's a good thing. I remember way back, Governor Douglas was talking about some reform in schools and stuff. I think he was talking about $23 million that didn't come about. We've had the study by some expert that says we could save $147 million. The legislators were patting themselves on the back that we got this school consolidation, but we haven't really gone to really getting rid of the feather bedding with Bridport had 80 students and an $80,000 principal. That sort of stuff. We've got to step forward there. I heard a rumor. Now this was from a Republican that the teachers union contributes $300,000 a year to the Democratic caucus. Now, is there any possible relationship with the Democrats being reluctant to tackle the school issues and save us a hell of a lot more than the $26 million? Thank you.
You're welcome, Ed. I wrote a few things down. I'll go in reverse order. So, yeah, I would imagine I have been an NEA member. I've been in the school. I have been a Teamster when I worked at UPS. I've actually been a Teamster and an NEA member at the same time. So I come from a very long history of the Irish Catholic Democrat that stands up for working class people. My father was a welder. My grandfather was the chief of the fire department. So there's a long history within my world around supporting unification and supporting working people. So I would definitely fall into that category. Democrats are for working people. That's part of our platform. That's what I would think that we should be supporting is our work and our workforce out there in Vermont. That doesn't mean I need to get in the middle of their business at times when they're working with their employers. The H-46, which was the school unification bill, from what I understand now, 50% now. This has actually gone far better than exceeded any expectations. When you said that we patted ourselves on the back, sometimes it's important to say that worked out well, or at least it's going far beyond what we thought would happen. 50% now of the student body in the state of Vermont is within a consolidated area, and others are coming. We took a look at some of the difficult spots in Vermont where they were having those community conversations that ran into some snags, and made a few adjustments that allowed them some more time to come up with some alternatives. So that's all working. The next part is going to be big, would be when I look at Addison County, which all of Addison County now is under a consolidated group. This is not what it's like in the rest of the state, though. We are all, whether it's Vergennes, Middlebury, Bristol, would be the next step is when do we have the brave conversation as our population of students still declines, unless they increase, but when do we start to consolidate our high schools into a different arrangement as well? And those are really, really tough community conversations. Growth rate, you mentioned. We are thrilled, as you said. We have been keeping, depending on whether or not you think of it as the state's funds, the general fund, the federal funds, but all funds, what is our growth rate in Vermont? What is going to be the number that we kind of stick with, that we say we want to keep it within a range, all right, of spending? For the last 5 years, 3 years that I've been on appropriations, we have been taking a really tight, it's not comfortable. Spencer had mentioned it. There's a lot of things that I'd like to invest in additionally, but we have to stay within our constraints. This year's budget, although we used an awful lot of some healthcare reserves, you got to keep in mind we had $38 million that we took out of there to help get there, which was another whole long story, but it was a good thing. So the state of Vermont's revenue growth was at 3.7%. That is healthy in this environment. 3.7% growth rate in revenue, 2% growth in our state's gross domestic product, and the House budget that we passed was 0.8% increase, 0.8. Now, the Senate had a little more money. You've heard of the Volkswagen money. Oh, we would have liked to have that on our side of the house too, but that was $4.2 million additional money that they had to use. By the time that was sugared off within the Committee of Conference, the all funds growth is 1.5 or 1.3. 1.5 came out of is general fund. So that's the growth rate, is really, really contained. Part of that is, Ed, because we've put a lot of great energy the last 5 years into getting to a place and dealing with, and you've heard me say this before, and I know my time is going to be up. 09, bad crash, economic cliff. Oh my goodness, ask for a lot of one time, like, oh, if we could just do this for a while, we'll get back to 5% growth. If we can just get through here, we're just gonna hold off on not buying any more police cars because we'll get back to it in 3 years, and we won't do this in order to, like anybody does in a bad time. Well, by 2015, it was very clear that we were not going to get to 5% anymore. So that holding off on things, we had to go back and say, we're going to have to look at the whole picture in a new way. And that's been very uncomfortable for people. All right. And I think that ends your question, or answers all your questions, I hope. Okay.
We are working
Right.
people, so you have to consider us.
That's who we are, working people. I just want to repeat it for the camera. Yes.
Okay. Paul?
Paul Bovin, Town of Addison. The interesting thing is when we take a look at the budget, I mean, I think you guys have done a reasonably good job. There's more money still left on the table that could be gotten. But I'm kind of a little bit worried about the federal umbilical cord that's going to be cut. I think sooner or later that umbilical cord is coming to an end. And whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. And the other thing that concerns me is how many of these promised retirement funds that we have, i.e. teachers, state employees, even you take a look, Burlington ended up with problems with their retirement fund for their people. There's a lot of those that are being, have budgetary shortfalls. The other thing that concerns me is the cleaning up of the lake and the municipalities and the failed systems in the cities and the allowing for further development in the cities without correcting their failed systems.
Thanks. Look, I was just going to say there's 4. Do I get 2 minutes each? I'll try to. Thank you, Paul. I'll tell you and your brother Mark keep me on my toes. Thank you. You guys are always interactive, respectful, and I've been a little, I've been playing with an 8-month-old, so I think I'd rather be here. All right, so questions are, money, feds, yes. Some people, the constraint that goes to Ed's point, that 0.8 increase in revenue in this budget, a lot of that, no new taxes, no fees, really is in response to, I think this is where we get 173-to-1 vote. The unified voice in Vermont is because we're concerned about what's coming, what's potentially going to come. And we want to, for lack of better, hold our powder. Hold whatever capacity that we have for anything to deal with the unknown that is probably coming. So that is a large motivator around why we kept our constraint. I mean, I have to tell you, I have to say no a lot more than I ever say yes. That's for sure. So I don't make friends everywhere I go. So that's the feds. So watch what's happening there, and keeping in touch. We have people that just keep an eye for Vermont on what happens. Even our federal delegation is terrific at this. Sanders, Leahy, and Welch, we can ask like, we can check in with them on certain things. The retirement funds you mentioned, you're right. I can report that we're okay. The state of Vermont controls, or overseas, we don't necessarily control 3 funds. The state employees retirement fund, the teachers retirement fund after they've retired, when they retire, we manage that fund, and the municipal employees fund. Those 3 are at the state level. The municipal employees are in very good shape if you want to go with actuarial tables. If you need to be at about 80% of what you need in order to be healthy, so to speak. But 09's crash in the market, because a lot of that money investment, I think it's 70 cents on the dollar, comes from investment growth on retirement. So when the stock market's not doing well, those accounts are not doing well. So we had 2 things occur, 09 and in the 90s, because it was going so well in the 90s, there was on the table, they didn't fully fund what you call the ARC, the responsibility. It's like not paying for your mortgage. It's like, I don't need to pay the whole mortgage because there's enough growth in that will get us there. So there was underfunding with the anticipation that growth would be there, and then not only was the growth not there, but it declined. So teachers' retirement is less than what I would call prime. We pay $111 million a year to invest into what I call the sins of the past. If it wasn't for our actions in the 90s of not funding the teachers' retirement, that $111 million, testimony from our treasurer, would more than pay for all of what we need to invest in cleaning up our lake at this point without anything new. Ugh, it's tough. So $111 million a year goes to pay for the sins in the past, and the current teacher's retirement sort of like payment is around 8 or 7.9%. And that gets to the lake cleanup. In the capital bill, there was additional $45 million, which is nowhere near what we need to do for the next 20 years, but it gets us a 2-year start. And there's a lot of other investments. That's a whole nother 2-hour piece, but there's a lot of activity on there. But I'm very, very concerned that we have not done what I would say the permanent, what is the 20-year funding source for the lake at the level that it needs. And then watching what the feds do when you talked about the EPA and the cutbacks in there. Are they going to be partners with us? And so the $45 million that's in the capital bill now, which hopefully we'll have this all wrapped up in a month, it will go to, a lot of that goes to municipalities for grants and other activities and in the ag industry. I think that, did I miss any? Okay.
You're next.
Thank you. Margaret Cloak, Middlebury. Listening to all the state information here has been very interesting, and every once in a while in the conversation, as it should be, there's the issue of the federal finances and where they're going and how that's going to affect Vermont. And I would like to say that I think it's very important that we have good federal officers here. I am very concerned that we don't think enough about the big picture of the federal government. And I would urge everybody here to contact their federal legislators and let them know that things like some sort of health care system needs to be fixed. If the one thing that I keep thinking of is that if Medicare and Medicaid are cut or eradicated or whatever happens to them because the thing is so erratic, if we think of Medicare, we need to be thinking of the people who are in nursing homes and get nursing home care, and when they have used up all their own finances, Medicaid is the only thing that they have to keep them in nursing homes and get the care they need, probably until they die. It's not a giveaway. These people have paid as much as they could possibly pay, sometimes given up their homes and sold them to be able to stay in nursing home care for the rest of their lives. And if they screw up Medicaid, I don't know what's going to happen to some of these people. We really have to pay attention to what's going on in Washington, because it really affects what happens in Vermont and all the other states in this union. And it's a serious, serious issue, so please pay attention to that too.
So I'll just comment on that it's very important to think globally but act locally, and being really a part of both of that. But I think, Vermont is small. One of the things, we're small, but we're nimble. And we can, because we know each other and we work together. And with that, we're not strangers, and there's not the other. So I think in this time of change, regardless of whatever the political environment, the world is in a different place, and we have to change with it, or it will change us from the outside. There'll be a lot of opportunities to be involved. That's going to be one of my calls here, is we're at the end. just like the Grange is involved and the people that you come to these meetings. Thank you. I'm glad that I could be here this morning because my grandson doesn't come till 11 o'clock. So I thought, oh, I can make a breakfast. But it's so important to stay involved. And the other thing is, it's also, you know, the legislature, I'm not making this call, but, you know, there's not staff. We don't have like 5 people working for us to help us craft messages and make sure we get things out. You know, that's me saying, you know what, it's raining Sunday, I guess we won't go for a walk. I will sit here and read this again and try to write something down of what happened. I wish that I could have the ability to be able to communicate more like this. I use Front Porch Forum and Facebook and other opportunities, but keeping each other informed about what's going on. I have the privilege of representing about 9,000 people, but that doesn't mean my ears aren't there. Mark and Paul are not shy about letting me know what their issues are, but there are many people who quietly are not that vocal, who don't step up to the mic or on camera, that might write me or see me in the grocery store. And sometimes the world is so busy, which it is, you know, that I have to take a breath. And when someone says very quietly, you know, did you do anything about childcare? That even though it's not like beating me over the head with it, that is their voice saying, I'm drowning. I need you to figure out a way to help me. I'm drowning here. And I take that very, very much to heart as we make decisions. That Vermonters, the big cross section of Vermont, and where do we invest in? I love our state, and I love the people that are here, and I love the fact that we care about our kids and our health and our environment.
The final word?
Final word. I find it a lot of fun being on one political spectrum as versus the other in Vermont. I think it is fun. We have Republicans that are serious, and we have Democrats that are serious. And we bust on each other and have a lot of fun with it most of the time. But I think it's important for whether it's the state government or the federal government even more, that we stick together and work on common goals and not be divided by the party idea. I think it's absolutely necessary if we're going to survive and get anywhere where we need to go.
Thank you so much for attending. This is your last opportunity to help the Bridport Grange and the Addison County Farm Bureau present these Monday morning legislative breakfasts for next year by, see that little white jar in the back? By putting all of your change and all of your dollar bills that you have brought into that bucket so that we can continue this process next year as we have for so many years. And again, a special thanks to the Bridport Grange for doing all of the hard work behind the scenes, and to the Addison County Farm Bureau for hosting the shows, and of course our other sponsors, both the Chamber of Commerce and Regional Planning, who actually don't contribute any money, but they certainly help us out in making sure folks are here. So if you want to see it continue, put something in that bucket before you leave. And thank you very much again for being such loyal followers of the legislature. And thanks to Diane.
I've got a few copies that I made on my computer at home that I'm willing to leave if anybody wants.
And if anybody